whatever market you choose, you need to be able to get a top tier property in that market. So the people who are not successful in the short-term rental space are the people who focus on quantity, not the quality of the property.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the KTS Success Factor podcast for women, where we talk about challenges senior female leaders face in being happy and successful at work. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah E. Brown.
My guest today is Madeleine Raiford-Holland. She has built 3 successful businesses and has a community of over 2 million people. She is the founder of MHM Luxury Properties, Madeleine Raiford-Holland Education, and Moderately High Maintenance Luxury Properties. Her mission is to inspire anyone who feels chained by golden handcuffs to step out of their comfort zone and build their own massively profitable short-term rental business. Madeleine helps aspiring short-term rental investors and established operators start or optimize short-term rental businesses that focus on elevated guest experiences and automated systems. Her goal is not only financial freedom, but also time freedom to live life on your terms. Welcome, Madeleine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great. I have to ask before we get started, what is a moderately high maintenance luxury property?
So I think that was actually a typo sent over by my admin. It was supposed to be moderately high maintenance. It is a lifestyle website, which I started when I was the COO of a government contracting company. I was traveling quite a bit and I wanted a creative outlet. So I started this lifestyle website called Moderately High Maintenance. My husband came up with the name, and now he would say there's nothing moderate about the high maintenance-ness of my life. But it is a website where I was sharing my travel experiences, different recipes that I had found. And it was just a creative outlet for me that ended up being the stepping stone into MHM, Moderately High Maintenance Luxury Properties. So that is the story behind Moderately High Maintenance. I need to get with Jennifer on that one.
Okay. Well, while we're talking about that, what's the URL for people who might be interested in checking that out?
It's moderatelyhighmaintenance.com. I haven't been actively posting on it in quite some time because all of my efforts have been really spent in my short-term rental space, but my properties are mhmluxuryproperties.com.
Okay. So how did you get into this work?
Well, that's an excellent question. So I shared a few minutes ago that I was a COO of a government contracting company, and it was a good job. Like, I enjoyed the work for quite some time, but I was spending hundreds of nights a year in hotels. And so that solo travel is what led me to start Moderately High Maintenance, the lifestyle website. And, my husband and I were both in the government contracting space, and we were both traveling typically in opposite directions, which is fun when you're kind of young and, travel is exciting, but we had started a family, and I will never forget sitting at my kitchen table with my 10-month-old son and my husband and saying, you know what, something has got to give. This part of my career is not serving me anymore. What can we do to stop making other people a ton of money and start building something for ourselves? I had read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and, just heard that the most millionaires were made through real estate. And so I said, long-term real estate doesn't really interest me. I don't think it's going to be kind of fulfilling to me. But what about short-term rentals? I've stayed in a ton of Airbnbs throughout my travels. I love hospitality. What if we could make this work? And so my lifestyle website, Moderately High Maintenance, I had been having all these brand partnerships with people like Delta Airlines, Target, Wayfair, these big companies. I said, what if I take all that I've been sharing over here and put it into one of my Airbnb properties? And it was so wildly successful that we opened 5 more in 6 months, and it just grew and expanded rapidly. But I put on my COO hat and said, I need to make systems, processes, automation. So I'm not creating another job for myself. So I actually got the time freedom. And I was successful in that. And now I help other families do the same thing.
Did you start this while you were still in your corporate job?
I did. I did.
And you had a baby at the same time?
And I got pregnant with my second child. So it was a lot. It was a lot all in a very short season of life. But we just had the commitment to knowing that there was a different way to do things. And once we said, you know what, enough's enough, we started taking purposeful action towards that.
And just for clarity, so that we're all talking about the same thing, what do you mean by short-term rentals? I know most people are going to know what Airbnb is, but what's your definition of short-term rentals?
Yeah, a short-term rental is typically anything that is rented for 30 days or less. The reason why I don't use the term Airbnb is because there are a lot of other ways to host people in a short-term rental. So there's Airbnb, there's Vrbo, and then my absolute favorite is my own personal direct booking website. So instead of people going to Airbnb and booking my property, they come to my website, which I would much rather own my book of business than rely on Airbnb or Vrbo. So that it's semantics, really. My short-term rental can be an Airbnb. It's just a terminology sake of I'm a short-term rental host, very similar to like an Airbnb host because I do host Airbnb.
When you got started, did you use a property you already had, like your house, or did you purchase something?
We purchased something.
Wow, that was a big commitment.
It was definitely a big commitment. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is they don't necessarily have to own a property in order to get started in short-term rentals.
Oh, say more about that.
Yeah. So there are three ways to actually get into short-term rentals. One is by owning the property. The second is through something called rental arbitrage, which is where you have a corporate lease with a landlord. So I go and rent as a long-term tenant with the agreement with that landlord that I'm able to sublease it out for short-term rentals. So you don't need as much capital up front if the property isn't performing like you hoped it would. You have a year-long lease and you're able to get out so it can mitigate some of that risk. And then the third way to get into short-term rentals is co-hosting. So helping somebody else manage their short-term rental property by handling the guest interaction piece of it. So I do all three within my portfolio. So I own, I arbitrage, and I co-host. And I think that that's a really beautiful full pie of how to run a short-term rental business. But there are a lot of ways to get started without having to make the capital investment of actually owning a property.
Very interesting. And why do you think this is such a viable option for women who want to get off the corporate rat race?
Hi, this is Sarah Brown again, the host of the KTS Success Factor podcast for women. I hope you are enjoying this episode and gaining some tips and inspiration on how you can be happier, more successful, and experience less stress at work. If you would like to learn more about how you can take control of your career and do it your way, visit saraebrown.com. There you will be able to download a free chapter from my book, Let Your Personality Be Your Career Guide. It contains information and exercises on how you can identify your unique interests, strengths, and needs, and translate that into career goals that are just right for you. Now back to this informative episode.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that no training is ever wasted. And so whatever part of the corporate structure you may be in, I think there's a way to apply what you know already into the short-term rental space. I'm big on finding what you love in a business and then outsourcing the rest. But having somebody who's gone before you and set up all the systems, processes, automations, like it's a proven business model that you can put your own spin on. And after you get the systems in place, you can truly run it in 1 to 2 hours a week. That's how I managed to run ours while still in my 9 to 5, while having a toddler and being pregnant and trying to grow and scale it into what it was all simultaneously. I'm not going to lie, it was hard during that season, but it was doable to have the time freedom now. So setting it up in the right way to begin with is what gives you the time freedom on this.
How long did you go before you felt comfortable enough to chuck the corporate job?
Yeah, so it was about a year for us, and the way that we did it was not necessarily the most scientific, but once we figured out what our ditch the 9 to 5 number, what we thought it was, we started banking our 9 to 5 paycheck and we put it in a separate bank account and we lived off of our short-term rental income because I think that's one of the hardest hurdles of jumping from a corporate job into entrepreneurship is the ebbs and flows and not knowing that you're going to have a steady, X paycheck every
Hmm.
2 weeks. And so what worked for us is for 6 months, we put all the 9 to 5 revenue into a separate savings account so that we were building up that nest egg and we got used to living off of the revenue from our short-term rental businesses. We use profit first accounting, which if you're looking at getting into short-term rentals, profit first book is one of the things that I highly recommend. But it was about a year and that's how we
Hmm.
kind of prepared ourselves to make the jump.
Hmm. Are there any specific challenges for women who might be transitioning from a corporate career that they should take into consideration if they're considering this?
Yes. So what I always like to advise people in is whatever market you choose, you need to be able to get a top tier property in that market. So the people who are not successful in the short term rental space are the people who focus on quantity, not the quality of the property. So
Mm.
I want my clients who I help, I want their property to compete on value because if you're competing on value, you're not having to be in a race to the bottom on the pricing. So we want somebody to look at your property and say, hey, that's where I want to stay and I'm willing to pay a premium for that. So part of that is knowing your budget and knowing how to choose a market where you can have a top tier property based on your budget. So if let's say you have $50,000 to allocate towards a project, you're not going to downtown Miami, but there are plenty of great smaller markets. Winston-Salem, North Carolina, I have a client who just bought a property there. You have your Wake Forest shirt on, but it's a thriving market. It has a university, lots of people traveling in and out, but housing prices aren't outrageous like they would be in a major metropolitan area. So being able to look at where you can get a good bang for your buck so that you can actually be profitable and knowing how to run the numbers on that property is such a crucial piece of
Hmm.
that puzzle.
Is it important to do it in an area and in a locale where you live? I mean,
Not
could I
necessarily.
do it in Winston-Salem? I live in Delaware. Could I do it in Winston-Salem?
Absolutely. I have clients like, for instance, Tennille and Travis. They live in California. Their property is in the Poconos and they are able to fully manage it remotely. They didn't want to buy in California because housing prices are outrageous out there, but their budget got them an amazing property in the Poconos and they're able to fully manage it remotely from wherever they are. And so I wouldn't let location be a big barrier to entry because there are ways around it.
And what services do you provide to help people that are getting started in this? Because I'm guessing that's what one of these companies is.
Yes, the MRH education is
Okay.
where I help women and families kind of go from zero to hero. So we take people through and say, hey, what are your goals for your business? Because I'm big on it being a personalized experience because your goals may not be the same as other people. Some people just want to help build a retirement and diversify that way. But we help you through the process of understanding your budget, market analysis. So the analysis and acquisition help you understand how to set it up physically. So all of the
Hmm.
things that you need to put in a property to make sure that it's going to be successful and then help you on the digital setup side of things to set up the systems, processes, automation so that you can run it in just a few hours a week. So zero to hero is what I like to say.
Do women differ from men in terms of success or approach in this business?
I'd say that everybody brings their own zone of genius to it. As I was sharing earlier with no training is ever wasted. I don't like to necessarily differentiate between women and men in this, but I do have a ton of women in my program and I love seeing what they are able to bring to the table. I think women naturally gravitate towards understanding the hospitality industry.
Mm.
I'd say that's definitely part of my zone of genius and I understand how to design a property for what I would like. And especially in markets that heavily lean towards having women who book them and understanding your guest avatar is an advantage that women in this business definitely have.
Hmm. Hmm. Madeleine, what did I not ask you that I should have that would help one of my listeners understand this as a real possibility for her?
Yeah. So I think what could have been asked is, what is the biggest pitfall that beginners have when they get started in this?
And what is the biggest pitfall?
I think the biggest pitfall is people who get stuck in analysis paralysis and who think that they have to be an expert to get started. The thing is, we all start as beginners in this, and the key is to find yourself a community of people who are already doing what you're doing, and then focus on taking the next best step in your journey. So this business is better with friends. Find your tribe of people who are already doing it, and then just take the leap.
It's really an exciting opportunity. It's something I hadn't really thought about before, but you make it really enticing. So,
Well,
Madeleine, thank you so much for being with me today.
thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to the KTS Success Factor podcast for women. If you like what you are hearing, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate us, and leave a review. And if you would like more information on how we can help women in your organization to thrive, then go to www.sarahebrown.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, read show notes, and learn more about our podcast guests, read my blog, browse through the books, or contact us for a chat. Goodbye for now.